Could you elaborate a little bit more on the different types of dimensions and the use for each?
Scientists have proven to be 11 dimensions on Earth. Now, don't ask me what they are. I'm not a fucking scientist, nor do they know what the dimensions past the 5th, 6th, and 7th. What we do know, which is basically using string theory, is we know dimensions 1, what an insect experiences, which is to exist at one point at a time in the space continuum. So he can only be in one place in one time, and that point is then marked by point A. A two-dimensional being, which is like an animal, can only exist from a point A to point B mentality because it has no notion of time. So an insect is a one-dimensional being trapped in a two-dimensional space. When we think about, for example, an animal, it is a two-dimensional being trapped in a third-dimensional space. So it can function in third-dimension space, but it can only function in a secondary dimension mindset. Meaning a lion or a cat does not have a notion of time. It's been proven time and time again that animals can't perceive time. So in other words, for an animal, he can only go from point A to point B. An animal can never go from point A, point B, knowing there's a point C, D, E, F, and etc. So every time it gets to a point, that point resets into what it is. So it's like point A to B. B becomes A again, you go to the next place. And so it continuously thinks about its next move, but only its next move, not its next 5 moves. But then what a human can do is function in a 3-dimensional space, planning where it's going to be in that space with the notion of time. So that's why an insect is a one-dimensional being, an animal is a two-dimensional being, and then a human is a third-dimensional being trapped in the fourth. Now, the argument I make in Gated Choice is that a human is actually not a third-dimensional being, but rather a fourth one experiencing a third-dimensional space as a matter of earning a personality. So it's a very different quadrant than what we've been trained to understand of why we exist on Earth. So my argument is that the third dimensional experience that a human undergoes is actually just an experience, like a simulation. However, a human is really a fourth dimensional being that is learning to master time through his third dimensional experience of it. Which is why I believe that many times when we talk about the greater power in the world, we look at a god or something else, I think of it as more, we're simply reaching out to our own conscious self and are working to find internally what we want our place in the universe to be in the fourth dimension, because we already exist there, but we just don't have an identity. You see, my spectrum for identity is that my understanding of how humanity or a human evolves is basically going through the 3 stages of life, which is my book, Third Circle Theory, which is a state of awareness, self-awareness, and consciousness. In the stage of awareness exists this very interesting dilemma, which is the function of a human with a purpose or chosen purpose in society, and then a chosen cosmic purpose, which is a purpose of creativity that leads you to consciousness. So self-awareness has 2 facades basically, and in order to graduate self-awareness, when you leave the stage of awareness into the self-awareness, you usually establish an identity in the societal sense, and then after that you establish an identity in the life sense. So the point that I'm trying to make here is that identity is a big part of why the experience of life occurs. And I think that in the fourth dimension, we also undergo a very similar thing, which is basically to gain identity through the 48 personalities we undergo. Those 48 personalities are basically like how we have 12 grades here on Earth, and we go through these 12 grades, and then we kind of choose a profession, right? We're 18 and we go, okay, like now I've gone through all of high school, I'm an adult, what do I want my life to look like? And I think it's the exact same thing in our fourth dimensional existence. So hopefully that makes sense.